All right, everybody. Hi, all, and welcome to another episode of A Sailor's Life Live at the USS Constitution Museum. My name is Emily. I'm an educator at the museum, and we are coming at you from Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm happy to report that our museum has now been open for about 3 weeks now. So if you are inclined to come down, you can get your time tickets on our website and explore our very hands-on, informative museum. But we are also, in the meantime, still continuing these virtual education programs to teach you about an aspect of life at sea on this ship. And what is this ship, you ask? It's the USS Constitution, the oldest commissioned warship afloat, also in Boston, Massachusetts, right across the Navy Yard from us. And what makes her the oldest commissioned warship afloat is that she still has a crew of active duty Navy sailors, about 80 of them on the ship. And what's cool about this program is that we have an active duty Navy sailor who joins us every time to share his or her perspective. And so I want to have that sailor introduce herself today. So sailor, reveal yourself.
Hi, my name is Patience Jones, or Seaman Jones. I'm a logistics specialist. For those of you who don't know, I pretty much just push paperwork, order things for the command, things of that sort. I'm a mail person. I joined the Navy about 9 months ago, and I joined to travel and to just do something great.
Awesome. So Patience, we're talking about back to school today. So what do you remember about going back to school as a teenager in middle school or high school?
I remember going back and just really, honestly, just ready to see my friends, hang out with my friends, laugh and joke and do all that funny stuff. I didn't really like the homework, though. I know that was my pet peeve. I hated homework.
Yep, I feel you there. So I didn't mind homework, but like math and science, not my jam. Yeah, okay. What do you remember not liking anything about going back to school?
I just didn't like the homework. Honestly, I did well in all the subjects. Like, I didn't really fall back at all. I was always A's, B's. I don't know.
All right.
So homework is just my pet peeve. I just didn't like doing work at home.
Yeah, I feel you. Do you have homework in the Navy?
I don't talk about it.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, all right, well, good. So yeah, what I remember about going back to school is my first day of school outfit was very important, and probably especially high school. I wanted to look cute, and show you a new person back from the summer. So good. Well, let's keep this in mind today, because our topic today is going back to school. But instead of going back to school as a teenager in a classroom, we are talking about going back to school on a ship in the 1800s, and specifically on USS Constitution. And so I'm going to share my screen here and pull up a picture of the folks that we are talking about today, which are the midshipmen on USS Constitution. These were a group of about 12 teenagers who came on the ship, and their job was to learn leadership and seamanship, and also things like math and literature and language. But they were in school, basically. They were on the ship as students to learn and eventually become a Navy officer. And as I said, there was about 12 of them on board, and that's not very many compared to the whole crew of 450. And they were, average age was between 12 and 18. So I want you to keep in mind today that these were all teenagers and they were all boys. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. So, class of 1812, if you wanted to be a midshipman, going back to school, learning what it took to be a Navy officer, you had to have some basic qualifications. You didn't have to take the SAT, you didn't have to take the ACT, but there was kind of a standard of things you needed to have to become a midshipman. So I'm going to do a poll here. Patience, if you want to bring your camera back on, we can talk about this as we do the poll here. So I have some questions for you all at home. I'm going to use the poll feature in Zoom. And so the first question is, can you read or write? Basic qualification to be a midshipman. Patience, I'm assuming I know your answer to that.
I can write.
Okay.
I can write.
Yes, good. So we can read or write. Why was that important? Because as a midshipman and therefore as an officer, you had to be able to write letters, you had to be able to write a logbook, you had to be able to write reports of battles to your superiors. So it's very important that you had those skills. And also, of course, you didn't necessarily have to have those skills if you were coming on board as a seaman or a boy. But as a midshipman, yes. Okay, so everybody in our poll can read or write. Great. All right, next question to becoming a midshipman is, do you have seafaring experience? How about you, Patience? Did you do any sailing before you joined the Navy?
Not yet, no, but I will, just not yet.
All right, not yet, okay. So you would fall into the no category. You didn't have any experience before coming on board. And it looks like our folks at home, some do have seafaring experience, which is a good thing. If you wanted to be a midshipman, you didn't necessarily have to have the experience, but the majority of folks did. About 54% of midshipmen, just over half, did have experience already. So that's going to help you get in to be a midshipman. Okay, next question. All right, do you come from a coastal state? I'm from Massachusetts, I would qualify. How about you, Patience?
Yeah, I'm from North Carolina.
All right, got some nice beaches there as well. Okay, so let's see, folks can vote on this. This was another, it didn't make or break whether you were gonna become a midshipman, but the far majority of midshipmen did come from a coastal state, which I guess ties into the fact that they had seafaring experience. So familiarity with the waters, the oceans, and sailing definitely helped you as a midshipman. All right, next question. Oh, we talked about this. Are you between the ages of 12 and 18? Okay. Okay, we're too old, Patience, to do this. All right, most of our folks here on board are not between 12 and 18. But like I said, that was the sweet spot of the age of a midshipman. The average age was 17. You could be a little older, but you generally did not have midshipmen coming back on the ship in their 30s to try to do this kind of job. Okay. Last question is, so you think you're doing okay now? You know, yeah, I could make it as a midshipman, I could get in, but here's the last question. Do you have personal connections to a member of Congress or a Navy official? Ooh. Patience, any personal connections?
Not to Congress. I know my grandfather was in the Navy, but I don't know what his ranking or position was.
Okay, okay, so you knew someone in the Navy, yep. This is the tough question. A lot of folks answered no here, which is right. In order to become a midshipman, you did have to have some kind of letter of recommendation or some backing from somebody important. That could be a member of Congress, or that could be someone in the Navy. And we're going to talk about that a little later, that connections really made a big difference. So if you answered yes to all those first questions, but said no to the last one, you are probably not becoming a midshipman. You need that letter of recommendation. All right, so we did our questions. Thank you, Patience. I'm going to share my screen here again. So I don't know if Patience and I would have made it in as a midshipman, but that's okay. For those that did make it in, they were psyched. This was a big accomplishment. Only about 1 out of 10 teenagers got an appointment on a ship as a midshipman. And one of them you're going to hear me talk a lot about today is Pardon Monty Whipple. This is a costumed interpreter of Whipple. But we love Pardon Monty Whipple at the museum because he left behind his letter book. And these were letters to friends and families that give us a really emotional account of what it was like to be a midshipman on Constitution. He came on board in 1813. So we love Whipple. You're going to hear a lot about him today. And he wrote so eloquently. When he found out he got onto Constitution, he said, "Having obtained the object of my most unbounded wishes and gaining admission to our little Navy," remember it was little back then, "which you know is extremely difficult in consequence to the great number of applicants from all parts of the Union, my next step is to get into action. A man must be happy who sacrifices everything for his country. I shall be in the zenith of my glory. Woo, powerful words. This guy was psyched. He was psyched to be on Constitution. He was psyched to have gotten into the ship as a midshipman. So for those of you who went to college out there, maybe it was a similar feeling to getting that college acceptance letter as well. So you get in, you get your appointment on a specific ship, you sign your naval oath. Here's one from 1842 from a midshipman, basically saying you're going to follow the rules and regulations of the Navy and you're going to support the Constitution of the United States. All right, so you got your letter, you got in, now it's time to pack up. Similar to college, these folks went away on a ship for long periods of time to go to school. So you had to pack up and bring some stuff you needed. And so we're gonna play a game. What's in Pardon Monty Whipple's sea chest? A sea chest was like the historic equivalent of your backpack. We go to school with our backpack, it's full of supplies we need. Pardon brought his sea chest, which was also full of supplies that he needed. And so we're gonna look at some of those supplies, which are here on your screen. And we're just gonna play a game that can you compare a modern school supply to what Pardon Monty Whipple would have brought on board. So for example, we'll start with an easy one here. One thing you might find in your modern day backpack is a textbook, US history. That was my favorite subject. So going back to our thing here, you can write in the chat or you can just play along in your own head. Which of these items is most like a modern textbook? Hopefully you are seeing, I gave you an easy one to start here. Hopefully you would have found the textbook. Pardon Monty Whipple also used textbooks just like we did. The one you see here is called The Practical Navigator. It was first written in 1802 and it taught navigation. It was a whole book about how you navigated and steered a ship through the ocean. So a lot of reading. We also know Whipple had a French textbook, so he was learning that language as well. So just like us, they had to do book learning and probably a lot of homework, which we know that Patience doesn't love. All right, next thing here, graphing calculator. I remember using one of these. I hated math, I hated trigonometry. This like gives me chills to even see this thing. But which of Pardon Monty Whipple's supplies would have been most like a graphing calculator? Do we have any guesses here? Hopefully you would have come up with this weird looking one, which is the sextant. A sextant was a tool used on board ship for navigation, and definitely any midshipman would have had one of these. This was a way that you measured the angle of the sun against the horizon, and therefore could then do calculations to give you the ship's position in the world, to give you longitude and latitude. So here's an illustration of how this worked. You'd hold the sextant up to your eye, you would measure the angle of a celestial body, usually the sun at noon, and then you would take a calculation based on the bottom there and do math. And so basically this graphing calculator is doing complex mathematical equations for us, and that's what the midshipmen had to do with their sextant. All right. Next thing you might have in your backpack is Pokemon cards, right? Maybe, is this still a thing? I think so. I know Pokemon Go is still a thing on your phone. So you might have some cards to swap with friends, some kind of game or something to keep you occupied during the school day. Which of these things would Pardon have had to do that? Hopefully we're seeing this one's also. Yeah, the shells, right? So we know Pardon had a shell and mineral collection that he kept. He probably picked this stuff up in the various ports that he stopped in. And so similar, like you trying to collect them all on the side of the street as you walk around your neighborhood, maybe Whipple was trying to collect them all in terms of shells. Okay, another thing in our modern day backpack was a snack. I definitely ate a lot of Cheetos. Flaming Hot Cheetos are my favorite snack. And so what is the equivalent in Whipple's sea chest of a snack here? And this one also should be fairly clear, which is the ship's biscuit. Okay, ship's biscuit. Not as appetizing as a flaming hot Cheeto. I do have to personally say, this is a hard piece of bread. It is not sweet. There is no sugar in it. It is flour and water. It is hard as a rock. And this was something that you kept on hand. It kept easily on long voyages. And so Pardon Monty Whipple might have had these around as a snack. He also might have had something like this. Any guesses as to what this is here? This is another food item. And this is, if you don't know, I'm seeing some folks here in the chat. Yeah, you got it, chocolate. Chocolate was something that midshipmen could purchase for themselves. They could use their own money to buy special food that not everybody was able to get. And so they were buying chocolate, and he could have a snack out of that as well if he wanted. All right. And the last thing is, of course, our phone. I don't know if there's one school supply that we have universally. We all usually have a smartphone now. And so the phone is something as well that he didn't have that. But what do you think out of these items was most close to a phone? And hopefully, we only have one left here, which is the penner. A penner was a writing set. As you can see, it folded up into a little tube, and it had paper, it had ink, it had a sealer to put your wax so you could seal your letter. And this is how you communicated. With no phone, back then, what you had was letters. You received your news from letters, you wrote your family letters, it was all about writing. And so definitely one of the most important things to have in your sea chest was your penner or your travel writing kit. All right. And then of course here we have a letter written by Pardon Monty Whipple. So I would say that's a lot more effort to do than writing a text. But that was the reality back then. So awesome, thanks for playing along to that game. Hopefully you've seen that maybe our backpack and a sea chest are not so different with hundreds of years in between. So Patience, I'm gonna bring you back online here. Patience is out on the quarterdeck of the ship. And so we've now, we've come into the Navy as a midshipman, we've seen what they packed. Now let's talk about what they did on board. And their main area to hang out was the quarterdeck. That's where they were learning navigation and seamanship. So Patience, give us a quick tour of the quarterdeck.
All right, so we're on oldest commissioned warship afloat. This would have been where the wheel is. It's not here right now. The original, you've seen the Pirates of the Caribbean, it would have pretty much looked like that, but then we made it a double wheel, so it's basically a wheel and then something to connect it to another wheel, but it was all one. This is the quarterdeck. We are on the aft of the ship right now. This is just where they would have all hung out because they would have learned about navigation, like you said. They would have learned how to steer the ship, how it connected to the helm, to the tiller room down below us, and the rudder, things of that sort. And this is all quarterdeck.
Ooh.
Yep.
Very nice. Okay. And right, so who would have been like hanging out on the quarterdeck with the midshipmen? Who were they learning from?
They were learning from the officers, so definitely the commissioned and the warrant officers. The captain obviously would have been back here, the first through the fifth lieutenant, and then the warrant officers, those sailors.
Yeah. So a colleague of mine told me that these guys were known as the young gentlemen of the quarterdeck. So they had their whole posse up here learning, right, especially at the ship's wheel. And where did these guys sleep? Where did they hang out otherwise when they weren't on duty?
They would have slept down on the berth deck, which is 2 decks below us, and they would have actually been officers, and then the midshipmen would have been right and forward or right in front of the wardroom, so they would have been the actual officers, and then their room could close off, and then you would have the midshipmen or the officers in training, and then you would have their steerage or their kind of wall blocking them from the Marines and then the enlisted. So you would have the Marines right out there to make sure nobody messed with the officers or the midshipmen.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so they were always in proximity to the officers who were their teachers and mentors, it sounds like.
Yep.
Yeah.
So kind of like when you shadow or job shadow, you just follow around the person that you're learning from. That's really all they did, unless they were learning like math, architecture, writing, and reading, like you said, from the chaplain. So.
Oh, okay, right. The chaplain on board was also one of their teachers. That's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was the schoolmaster.
Yep, and the schoolmaster. Right. So we had folks on board who were dedicated to teaching these young men. Okay.
Yep.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to show the folks at home here a picture or an illustration of the quarterdeck. Of here, what Patience just showed us, but this does show the wheel here. And certainly one of the things they learned up here was how to steer the ship. And so Sarah, if you can share in the chat right now, this fun mini game we have at the museum of you can also try at home steering a ship, which is something midshipmen were learning. I have a quick clip here of how you play this game. This game is legit hard. Like, you don't want to know how many times I tried to get a clip for you that was successful. So I wish you all better luck on this, but you're trying to navigate this ship so it lands on the correct space to resupply. There we go, I made it. And as you can see, there's a lot of different barriers in the way as well. So you guys can have fun with that at home. Sarah shared that in the chat. Get a taste of what it was like to learn navigation. And then as Patience said, the midshipmen, not only were they just learning seamanship, they were also learning leadership. So they could do anything the captain ordered them to do. And sometimes they would supervise a gun crew. Sometimes they would supervise the sailors climbing up, going aloft. They often oversaw some of the chores on the ship, like putting away your hammock and holy stoning the deck. And they might run orders and they might stand watch. They might have to be on duty for a 4-hour period, making sure the ship was safe. So they had all kinds of duties like that too, besides just their official lessons. All right, good. So I want us to keep in mind throughout this that, as I said earlier, midshipmen were teenagers. These were teenage boys between 12 and 18. Patience, what do you know about teenage boys? Is she there? What's your take on teenage boys?
Let me try. No.
You're good, I see you.
Oh, okay. What I take on teenage boys is they mature later than females, that's for sure. I don't think they're focused on schoolwork.
That's right.
I really don't know. Try not to mess with the boys, you know?
Oh, I know. Yep, I got you. And I don't know if we have any teenage boys watching, so shout out if you are. I was a high school teacher in Louisiana, so I taught 9th and 10th graders, and yeah, Patients agree with you. Maturity level, not always the highest there. So it was the same on Constitution. You had a group of teenage boys. They're going to do what teenage boys do. One is they're going to pull pranks on each other. Here we have a painting of midshipmen on a British ship from the 1820s, literally doing the oldest prank in the book, where he is painting his friend's face while he's sleeping. Okay, we're still doing this at college parties and drawing mustaches and stuff on each other. They were doing this in the 1820s. They're boys, they joke around, they have fun. One of Pardon Whipple's letters, he talks about going into Naples and trying to boil an egg in one of the hot springs there. So just silly stuff, trying to be silly, trying to, one up their friends. So that was one thing, that they were like teenagers. Another thing like teenage boys do is that they beef. There's some fighting, and girls do that too. I will say my high school girls also had beef with each other and fought. But certainly if you were disrespected, if you were offended, if you were, if you felt someone had wronged you as a midshipman, you had to fight it out. And your hormones were high, your emotions were high. And the way that you did that in the 1800s, right? Nowadays we might go out in the schoolyard and fight someone. In the 1800s, you had something called a duel. And a duel is where if you had a beef with somebody, someone disrespected you, you challenged them to a duel. And you would fight it out that way with a gun. So Patience and Jay, can you separate for us 20 paces? So they're gonna walk 20 paces away from each other. Okay, just to give you guys a sense. There we go. So then patients would take out a dueling pistol. Jay, who's behind the camera, would also take out a dueling pistol. And at the same time, they would fire. They would stand there and both fire. Okay, thank you for the demonstration. Okay, good to see how far away that is. I'm gonna share my screen here because we actually have some pistols, dueling pistols in our collection. So they would take out this pistol and they would fire. And often somebody died. And in Constitution's history, in a matter of a four-day period, we had 2 sets of midshipmen who went off the ship and had a duel, and 2 of them died. So this was something that happened a couple times in Constitution's history, and it might seem really strange to us, but that's the way that they worked out their differences and that they fought. And so 2 midshipmen died as a result of this duel, of these duels. And these, I will say, these did not happen on the ship. These happened off the ship. They were formally arranged. And normally, if you had a duel, that you would be severely punished. When the captain found out about this and found out literally one of his crew members was dead, this was not a good thing. You would be severely punished, you would be transferred off the ship, or you would be dismissed from the Navy altogether. So not something you wanted to do. But I will say that that's an interesting note, because one of the duels we have record of in 1810, one of the duelers who survived, his name was Archibald Hamilton. And he was the son at the time of the Secretary of the Navy. And so that captain at the time, who was Isaac Hull, I believe, basically he didn't give them any punishment and let them all off with a reprimand. So this is to say, once again, it mattered who you knew as a midshipman, and if you were well connected, you got that better treatment. And so certainly I think we see that nowadays sometimes in our own college admissions, that the folks who are more well connected, maybe more affluent middle class, certainly all the midshipmen were white. They were people of privilege, and so they were given this opportunity to become a midshipman that not everybody had this equal opportunity at the time. And Patience, you had a cool fact too, or an interesting fact about one of the other midshipmen who died on the ship, right? Who was also well connected.
Yeah, so in addition to what you just said, you also had to have a lot of money. It's not even just about the ethnicity. You have to have a lot of money, kind of like the last question on your poll. That was definitely something really big. You had to come from a lot of money, come from education, something like that. But what you're talking about is our first captain was Samuel Nicholson. So he was our first original USS Constitution captain, and his son was on board, and he was a midshipman. Sadly, he died during his time as a midshipman from a fever or consumption, as we say, but he was, in fact, a midshipman.
All right, so there's another, yeah, well-connected son of a Navy captain also got an appointment as a midshipman. Yeah, good point about the money. Being on board ship was similar to kind of paying for college. Your parents often paid your bill. They paid for your uniform. They paid for your rations, your food. All of that you had to pay yourself. So that was a little different than the regular able-bodied sailors on the ship. So definitely you had to come from money. Thank you, Patience. All right, I'm gonna share my screen again and share one more thing about teenage boys, which is they had to basically, teenage boys, they got to take care of their crushes. They got to take care of their babes. And the way that they did that is they would often send them a piece of their hair or give them a piece of their hair before they left for a voyage. So, instead of us taking a sultry photo on Instagram and sending it to our bae, these midshipmen were cutting off a piece of their hair to give to their lady or their crush before they left. So this is Pardon Monty Whipple's hair, literally in our museum collection. This is a fan favorite here. We also have this item in our collection, which is a portrait of an anonymous midshipman. We don't know who this is. But you can see he had a portrait done in a locket and also put his piece of hair in it, in the back of it, and gave that to his lady love before he left. So teenage boys, just like a lot of teenage boys, had crushes on folks and had to keep that going even while they were at sea. And lastly, You had to make it fashion. Any teenager, I think, is a little bit fashion conscious. Like I said, that's what I remember from my first day of school, making sure I had a cute outfit. Midshipmen, they also had to look good. That was part of the role. Being in the Navy was status, and you had to look the part. And so this here is Pardon Monty Whipple's hat. The hat was one of the main things that you had. The one on the left is his hat in our collection. It's very beat up. It's missing a lot of the ornamentation. The one on the right shows you a little more what it would have looked like. And yeah, midshipmen only made about $19 a month. That's not very much money. And like I said, they also had to pay for their food and their uniform. And so we have an account of one midshipman, Charles Lacey, who in a year's time, he spent $140 on just clothing. And so if you do the math with $19 a month, that's 57% of his income just on clothes. So he had to look good. I'm sure there's something out there in back to school that we all need to have and look good. But it was the same with midshipmen. This is their ceremonial sword that they carried as well to look fly. So this was part of their midshipman swag here as well. This is in our collection. And so, we're talking about boys will be boys, teenagers will be teenagers here. What was important to them certainly is similar to what's important to us, to these folks these days. But, this was a real, yes, they were on board to learn. There were fun times. They joked with their friends. They got to travel. But they were also on this ship, especially with Constitution, during a war. And so Pardon Monty Whipple, who talked about, oh, I'm so excited to serve my country. Here's another midshipman, also in 1812, it's kind of showing us the reality. After a battle, pieces of skulls, brains, legs, arms, and blood lay in every direction, and the groans of the wounded were enough to almost make me curse the war. So just keep that in mind too. These folks were on board for battle. These were terrifying moments, and they're young men experiencing this firsthand. So that was also tough for them. So Patience, can I bring you back here? And can you tell us a little about, we've been talking about 1812 era, which Constitution, we focus on a lot of her history, but what is the deal with midshipmen now in the Navy, and what's some of the history of that?
So now midshipmen is really just when you go to, I don't think we call them midshipmen anymore, but we do. So we do call them, but what it is they just go to schooling, kind of like basic training, but instead of basic training just to join the military, it's basic training to become an actual officer. So there's specific things that you have to learn as an officer. Okay,
gotcha. So there are still midshipmen in the Navy. They go to school to be an officer. Do you know if it's a 4-year school? Is it like a college, or I should have looked that up. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right, it's at the Naval Academy. I'm gonna share a screen here. Because actually after Constitution fought in the War of 1812, she transitioned in the 1860s to becoming a classroom, basically a floating classroom for the midshipmen at the Naval Academy. And this is a drawing from a midshipman at the time. Basically, he did a sketch of what learning classes were like on Constitution. So very cool thing from one of his sketchbooks. And then this is a group of naval midshipmen from also the 1860s in Newport, Rhode Island, which is where Constitution was hanging out at the time. And people were coming on her to learn. So she was still a floating classroom. And as Patience said, you can still sign up to be a midshipman today. You're gonna go to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. You're gonna take classes much like a college student. And when you're done, you are able to get an officer commission in the Navy. So still an important job. We got some love in the chat for midshipmen. Yep, still an important job in the Navy, and still one of the ones that is around today. So that is our program for you today. I hope you have, if you are going back to school, you've been a little inspired by the midshipmen and some of the things that they learned. You're excited to go do your trigonometry and learn your languages. Patience, do you want to just give a shout out to everyone and say goodbye? Thank you for joining us.
Yep, thank you for joining us. Come see us Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 10 to 4.
All right.
And the 6th, sorry.
Yes, yes, come see the ship. The ship is open too. They would love to have you. Folks like Patience are super knowledgeable and glad to have you on board. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, and be well out there. Stay smart. Okay, bye.